Now we turn to the jobs agenda. I'd like some of our friends now to join me on stage to discuss recent progress on the next steps of this agenda. Nick Fowler, CEO of Perpetua Power Source Technologies and Chairman of Zaps Technologies in Corvallis. Nick. Russ Hoeflich, the Oregon State Director of the Nature Conservancy and my friend. Russ. Paul Harlan, VP of Resources for the Collins Companies in Lakeview. Paul. And John Mullis, the Executive Secretary of Oregon's Building and Trades and Construction Council. Thank you all for being with us. So I'm going to come and join you if I can. And John, maybe we could start with you for a moment. You probably are closest to what's going on out there, and maybe you can just give us a sense of what the feel is. Are we making progress?
Well, thanks, Pat. And I think 2011 will be characterized as a year where we made some good but sometimes slow progress forward. For us in the construction industry, Intel has been the huge game changer. And so once again, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Intel for their vote of confidence and their huge investment in our region. Vestas is rehabbing the old Meyer and Frank warehouse down in the Pearl District, and that will become their North American headquarters. Solo Power is in the process of retooling two existing buildings in North Portland, and will be manufacturing solar panels there. So that's, again, provided great opportunities for our construction workers. And in Solo Power's case, we'll add hundreds of manufacturing jobs to our region. And I think both of those projects point to the success of our more focused economic development strategies. The Edith Green building project in downtown Portland was part of the original federal era stimulus dollars, and those seem like a long time ago, but that project is going full bore right now, and again, in addition to the construction jobs it's providing, I believe that all the architecture and engineering firms that are working on that project are locally based, so it's providing jobs for those folks as well. One down note, the OTIA funds are started downsizing this year, and they'll rapidly continue to diminish next year. And over the past several years, OTIA funds have provided hundreds of thousands of dollars for road and bridge projects throughout our state. And I really hate to see them go away, and obviously in the tight times that we're in, that effort is going to be very tough to try and replicate again. On a more positive note again, the friends that I talked to in the design firms in town say that for the last year they've been getting busier and hiring more folks. And normally that translates into 6 or 9 months down the road, some of our folks going to work. And it seems a little slow this time. And I'm not sure if it's just general uncertainty or financing issues or exactly what it is. But I sure hope some of those projects come to fruition and put some folks back to work. So it's a bit uneven. There's still far too many people that are unemployed and underemployed, but I really believe that we're in a better place now than we were a year ago.
Yeah. Great, thanks, John, for that rundown. We're going to circle back to you, but Nick, let's turn to you. You have been described as one of Oregon's most promising innovators. You hail from what we understand from the senator's speech to be the most innovative city in the country, Corvallis. Tell us a little bit about your companies, what you're doing, and then if you wouldn't mind, maybe a little bit about what Oregon's infrastructure is like for tech startups, because clearly that's an area ripe with promise for job creation.
I'd be very, very happy to, and I hope you don't mind if I stand up. I think a little bit better on my feet, and we're going to be sitting most of the day. And for that introduction, you must have been speaking with my mother, because I don't know who introduces me.
She sends her regards.
Thank you. But as examples of where we stand from the Oregon business economy from a startup standpoint, I'd like to use 3 example companies. And as we learned in business school, the pillars of building a new business or new business creation are really pretty simple. There's 4 pillars, right? There's innovation of new ideas, there's gather together a world-class team, access to capital, and access to markets. If you have all 4 of those, you're in great shape and you've built a business. I'd like to highlight two of those, perhaps, in my short amount of time I've got to speak this morning, and innovation is the first. Northwest Medical Isotopes, all three of these companies are Corvallis-based companies. Northwest Medical Isotopes is in the process of developing new chemistry to isolate a critical radioisotope for cardiologists. Worldwide shortage, opportunities there for the marketplace. Perpetua Power Source Technologies creates renewable batteries by using the thermal electric effect, where gradients and temperatures are translated into electricity and stored in a renewable battery for later use. And ZAPS Technologies uses optical spectroscopy to identify contaminants in water for our municipal water systems, for river management and monitoring, and industrial monitoring. So here's three companies that, at face value, couldn't be any more different. At the same time, they couldn't be any more similar, because across the bottom of that slide is the commonality. Each of these companies has benefited from technology transferred from the Oregon University systems. And two of the three companies has benefited from technology from the Pacific Northwest National Lab up in Richland. So these two entities, our Oregon University system and the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, are great sources of innovation. And I think our tech transfer offices in the University of Oregon and Oregon State University have done an absolutely outstanding job of getting the message that innovation needs to be exported from our universities and commercialized. The other point in common with all three of these companies is a connection with ONAMI, one of our three signature research centers, the Oregon Nanoscience and Microtechnologies Institute. ONAMI provides tremendous support for startups in the material science area. We get access to laboratory facilities. We get access to our university system under special arrangements. There's some modest funding to get our ideas to demonstration and proof of concept for commerciality. There are entrepreneurs in residence. And so when we look at our signature research centers, I think we can pat ourselves on the back for making a great decision in Oregon for instituting these types of institutions. Because both from our university system, supported through ONAMI and our other signature research centers, I think we get an A+ as a state in getting our innovation started towards commerciality. So let me move now to another pillar of business success, and that is access to capital. Here is where these three companies differ. Each is at a different stage. So Northwest Medical Isotopes is at the seed stage, and I'll use investment terms. Seed stage is the earliest stage of a company where you're gathering just enough money, a modest amount of money, to demonstrate a viable technical proof of concept. Here, Oregon does extremely well in addition. We've mobilized throughout the state a number of angel groups. We heard already this morning about the Gorge Conference. We've got Angel Oregon. We've got the Willamette Angel Conference. We've got the Bend Venture Conference. We've got the Southern Oregon Venture Conference. So we've done a great job as a state mobilizing private angel money to establish and get to the proof of concept for these new technology startups. So I give ourselves a strong A in this category as well. ZAPS Technologies is a Series A company, and this is where the proof of concept has migrated and demonstrated first customer sales. And here the requirements for most Series A customers or companies are a few millions of dollars. So our angel investors continue to do a great job in generating the necessary capital to move a company from proof of concept to first customer shipments. And we've done a good job with the Oregon Growth Account, where Oregon Growth Account has contributed nearly $70 million into technology startups. We also are able to get early stage financing from out of state through venture capitalists. So I give our state a B with respect to attracting Series A funding for technology startups, and I'm pleased to say that the ZAPS has successfully closed its Series A. Perpetua Power Source Technologies is at Series B. And Series B is where you're taking a first successful customer shipments and revenues and scaling it globally to complete on a worldwide scale. These are the companies we want in Oregon, because this is where the technology startup migrates from a couple of dozens of people to a couple of hundreds of people in terms of jobs. And Series B is where we disproportionately do not realize the benefits of the technology transfer. We are 8th in the nation, I heard this morning, with respect to the number of patents per capita, highly innovative state, but we don't capture our fair share of venture capital, institutional capital. We need to do more in order to bring institutional capital to Oregon so we can grow many more companies beyond Series A and into Series B. Now, Perpetua has been very successful. We've been able to raise Series B monies, and so we're very pleased to move forward on that basis. But we need more companies migrating from Series A to Series B for jobs. Final point on the access to capital. I've been talking so far about equity capital, venture money, angel money. But we all want a diversified economy here in Oregon that includes production, manufacturing. And manufacturing infrastructure is generally supported through debt financing. And here's the cruel irony of startups. Startups are the job growth engine for our state. We add many more jobs in startups than in any other sector. But startups have no collateral, and so they can't qualify for traditional debt financing. Here is where we have the opportunity to provide programs to enable access of debt financing to companies in the startup community in Oregon to diversify our economy and bring back manufacturing jobs. So I'm looking very much forward to Ted Wheeler's comments this afternoon on the Oregon Investment Act, because it holds great promise, and I believe that we should support it. So thanks for listening to my comments, and Pat, let me turn it back to you, and I'll sit back down.
Thank you, Nick. Very much appreciated. Russ and Paul, it seems like every year we're here talking about the need for more production off of our forest lands. And every year it seems like we're not capturing that elusive wind of more jobs in the forest while creating gains in terms of forest health. So maybe you, the combination of the two of you, could tell us a little bit about why we don't seem to be getting there, what the hurdles and roadblocks are, and when we actually expect to see some acceleration on that business plan agenda.
Okay, let me take a start. I'll go up to the podium here.
Please.
We actually have some pretty good news for you today. The message actually we bring is fairly simple. We stand on a threshold of great opportunity. Investing in the restoration of Oregon's federal forests will put thousands of Oregonians back to work. So I really want to reflect back on the years where we've been talking about this issue and why today we're really at a verge of a moment of golden opportunity. But first, I want to take a quick moment and state the obvious. Oregonians care very deeply about the state of our forests, in addition to providing jobs and products and really being a major economic driver. Our forests in Oregon are tremendously diverse. They have fish, they have wildlife. In fact, more than 800 species of plants and animals are found in our region's national forests. In fact, half the water supply of our nation comes from our national forests, and in Oregon, 75% of us get our drinking water from these lands. But we have a problem. A century of suppressing natural fire has produced unhealthy, overcrowded forests, and we are losing these lands to unnaturally severe fire and pests at a really increasing rate. The question for all of us is, how bad is it? At the Nature Conservancy, together with the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Bureau of Land Management, we have developed a very, very comprehensive assessment of our nation's forests. And quite honestly, the results are sobering. Across the United States, we have about 120 million acres of forests that are in crisis. The raging fires that we saw this summer across the Southwest are just indicative of the symptoms of the problem. Here at home, the problem is concentrated in our publicly owned frequent fire forests of eastern and southern Oregon. On the map, yellow is bad, red is worse. But basically what we're talking about, the colors tell you that the forests have missed between 1 and 3 fire cycles. In Oregon, this adds up to 9.5 million acres at risk of catastrophic loss. Now, this is the size of the problem, but it is through this leadership summit that we have begun to see this as the size of our opportunity. The solution is to get Oregonians back to work, restoring our public forest, thinning and harvesting these overstocked stands. Yes, we all know about the social and political barriers that have stymied this vital work in the past, but I am here to tell you today that the majority of these barriers are largely behind us. With science-based tools of analysis guiding us, both industry, community leaders, and yes, conservation groups like the Nature Conservancy have found common ground. Perhaps what is surprising is that groups across the spectrum, including the Sierra Club, Oregon Wild, are working collaboratively to get the forest health treatments to scale. In Oregon, there are now 8 large-scale collaborative efforts underway, uniting communities and stakeholders around plans of action in our region. A key part of the solution is having the mill and labor force infrastructure available to make use of the wood coming off of these forests. These collaboratives are uniting behind a vision of healthy forests. Working side by side with the Forest Service, they're building trust, creating solutions, and demonstrating success. The first year at the Leadership Summit, we talked about 40,000 acres of treatments taking place. This year, this past year, we're up to 180,000 acres. Our biggest challenge right now is taking those solutions to scale. At the current rate of federal investment, it will take 75 years to restore these 9.5 million acres. That's too slow to address the problem. It's a recipe, quite honestly, for vast forest regions and nearby communities going up in smoke. So here's the alternative. Invest in tripling the current rate and get the job done over 25 years. In the process, we will be sustaining over 4,000 living wage jobs, keeping the mills running, making local communities safer, and restoring health and resiliency to these national forests. To give you a flavor of what this means to the local communities, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Harlan from Collins Pine.
Thank you, Russ. Well, appreciate the time to be here, and I'm here to talk about the accidental creation of the solution, and Russ kind of talked about it, is the collaboratives. And I want to, in a short period of time, walk you through that. Western Oregon, as you see on the map here, Western Oregon is 50% public ownership. And the public ownership here is in blue, and the remainder is private timberland, which is highly productive on the west side as we know it, and that's what we really know as Oregon. It also is, for the most part, close to a metropolitan area. Eastern Oregon, to the contrary, 71% federal ownership of timberlands. The timberlands are less productive where I live on the east side, as you can see from here. We're also very distant from metropolitan areas. The first traffic light I come to when I leave Lakeview is 90 miles away. First mall is 175 miles. So the thing about Eastern Oregon, when we talked about transportation earlier, the senators, Eastern Oregon is dependent upon its surroundings. Well, I'm going to have to divert because it looks like I don't have the right PowerPoint here. But in July of 1996, I walked into our sawmill in Paisley, Oregon, and announced to the crew in late January that we were shutting the mill down for lack of timber. Paisley is a community of 340 people, and because of the collapse of the federal timber program, we had to shut it down. This triggered strong debate whether our remaining sawmill would be able to survive the meltdown of the federal timber program that we were dependent upon in Eastern Oregon. Out of that, the Lakeview Stewardship Group started out of a meeting in Lakeview in 1998 where local leaders, me being one of those, called to come together to talk about federal forest management. What are we going to do about federal forest management and our communities dependent upon them? And out of that, environmentalists, timber workers, the U.S. Forest Service, personnel, and ranchers, we quickly came to realize we had more in common than we had opposing views. And that's something that Russ, and you talked about the collaborative that you showed all around the state. And from that, we worked out a vision of how 550,000 acres of the local national forest ought to be managed, that we saw that. In 2007, 9 years later, based upon that working relationship and not yet actually having true outputs, Collins in Lakeview, we took a risk. We invested $6.7 million based on a relationship with environmentals and local folks. And I don't know if you've noticed, but you cannot get a hard commitment contract from the federal government. You know, they'll shake your hand, say, hey, I'm with you, we're partners, everything else, but it's hard to get a contractual commitment from them. We spent $6.7 million and put in a small log mill to reduce fire risk and improve forest management on the national forest. Took a huge risk. And it was a big thing to be opening a new sawmill in 2007. Pretty big deal to be doing that. But the bigger deal to come out of that was the fact that at that opening, we had the Wilderness Society, we had the Defenders of Wildlife, we had what was then the Oregon Natural Resources Council, and we even had our state's own Andy Kerr there celebrating the opening of a sawmill dependent on federal timber off national forest lands. That was a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
The type of thing that Russ talked about, and I think that's what's new, is that we're really getting some grips on stuff. This year, October 2nd, after 3 years and 11 months, that new sawmill in less than 4 years cut its 2 millionth log. I challenge you to count to 2 million. In less than 4 years, that mill cut its 2 millionth log, and they're about that big around, off of those stewardship projects. So locally, we're working on about 3,000 acres a year of national forest land, but as Russ said, that's not enough. That's out of 200,000 acres, 70 years to go through that. I won't be here when we finish this up. The resulting timber stands are fire resistant. That's exactly what we're after, and they're healthier and less susceptible to insects and disease. But the needs for these treatments is much greater than all the progress that we've made to this point. And therein lies actually the good news that we have in the forest products here in Oregon and dealing with national forests. We have the ability to do more, evidenced by what we did in Lakeview, evidenced by other places like John Day, the Blue Mountains, and other places that the communities are now starting to work through these issues and coming up with what do we have in common, not what can we disagree on. So we have a future. But like Russ pointed out, we need to be doing 3 times more than we're doing currently to have an impact on what's going on. Not long ago, I walked into that mill in Paisley and shut it down. And it impacted some of the finest men and women and families in small communities that we have in Oregon. Incredible people that we call home here in Oregon. And out of this, though, we came up with a common vision for what we thought maybe the future ought to be. And we put that common vision to work, sustaining our current jobs that we had at the mill in Lakeview. We also created new jobs from that, but more importantly, we provided new hope for our communities that are dependent on these federal lands that we have before us. There's an abundance of opportunity in Oregon relating to federal forests and moving them in a positive and sustaining direction. I think we're getting more traction with that, Pat, today. And Lakeview really is a proof that it was an accident waiting to happen. We didn't mean to have a collaborative, but the collaborative obviously has been positive going forward at the local level. Russ now is going to take it back to the state level. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
So to sum up, what we're saying, we're on the thresholds, frankly, of a great opportunity. Thanks to the leaders, many in the room that I see out here who have worked with us so hard to create a uniquely Oregon solution, these are actually fairly exciting times. Our congressional delegation is leading the fight for federal forest land restoration funding. Just 2 weeks ago, Senator Wyden rallied his colleagues to restore $107 million for hazardous fuel treatments across the country. Our governor, who will be with us in a few minutes, also rallied the Western governors to unite behind these efforts. But the federal government really can't do this alone. Oregon needs to be an equal partner in these efforts and make strategic investments both in the science-based collaborative work but also the on-the-ground restoration treatments. We'll talk more about this and get into the details at 3:15 in the breakout sessions, but let me be clear. If united, we can get this job done. Quite honestly, it's time to seize the moment 25 years from now. Let our children say that this day, this leadership summit, was at the point in time when our state took back control and became equal partners in the management of our national forests. Our communities will prosper as a result of our efforts, and I just want to thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Russ, Paul, what was the phrase you used? The accidental creation of a solution?
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds to me like while you may have found yourself in that circumstance, there was nothing accidental about the creation. It's a lot of hard work and a lot of collaboration, so congratulations on that. John, back to you. So we've talked a lot this morning about what was, I think, a very productive legislative session last year. We saw bills pass on industrial siting and permitting and transportation. Maybe if you could give us a sense of what you saw as most significant there, and then maybe going forward what we really ought to have in our sights for on-the-ground job creation.
Sure, I'd be glad to. There was several very positive pieces of legislation that passed in the last session. House Bill 2700 will make it easier to permit and build linear projects such as water and sewer lines, railroads, transmission lines, natural gas pipelines. Connect Oregon 4 was funded to the tune of $40 million, which is a smaller number than in previous iterations, but considering the very tight financial constraints that we were under, to keep the program alive and keep it funded at that level, I think was a substantial achievement. And Connect Oregon dollars fund non-road projects such as ports and railroads and airports. Senate Bill 766 will make it easier to site manufacturing facilities on industrial lands around the state. Cool Schools was one of the governor's flagship initiatives, and I'm not sure if it passed unanimously in both chambers, but if not, it was near unanimous. That initiative is already putting folks to work in schools around the state, and obviously every dollar that a district doesn't pay in an inefficient heating or lighting or HVA system is a dollar that they can spend better educating their students. There's a couple of schools in eastern Oregon that have changed out their boilers to new boilers that burn wood pellets that are manufactured here in Oregon from wood waste product. So I think if you throw that wrinkle in, you've sailed past a triple bottom line benefit into probably at least a quadruple. Last week, the Columbia River Crossing project received its federal record of decision, which is a major milestone for that project and something that we're all very pleased with. A couple of areas that I think require some careful and diligent follow-through. I think we need to reach out to the folks that are trying to site manufacturing facilities around the state and see if 766 is helping their efforts. It's very important that we grow our state's manufacturing base. Cool Schools. How do we take that program in these very tight financial times and reach out and find some new funding sources, maybe pension funds, whether public or private, and work with our utilities and ramp that program up and start weatherizing government buildings, buildings on our higher ed campuses. It'd be a great program to expand, and we need to give that some good thought and push. Both governors have been instrumental in providing leadership to move the Columbia River Crossing project forward. And Treasurer Wheeler did an exhaustive financial study that laid out different funding and tolling scenarios, which I think was a very wise move. It's a big project, and it's one that we want to go into with our eyes wide open. But I really think it's time for both states to partner and to reach out to our federal partners and figure out a sensible and comprehensive plan to fund that project and get it in the ground and get it going. Last item real quick, Governor Kitzhaber and Attorney General Kroger have appointed a task force that's looking at our state's regulatory and permit processes. And they've made it very clear that the purpose of the task force is not to cut corners or to tear down what we hold dear as Oregonians. But if there's places where there's overlap, if there's places where there's multiple agencies that are responsible for permits, what are some good common sense ways that we can work together to sort some of that stuff out so that businesses that are hoping to expand or businesses that want to move to our state can do so in an efficient manner and put some folks back to work. And Fred Granum is doing a very nice job of shepherding that project forward. So it's a few thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I don't know if you got up like I did this morning and read the Oregonian, but they had an editorial about our summit today. And the editorial, I think, was a good piece, and it made a number of points, one of which is, I think, dead solid right, is that with regard to our agenda in moving jobs and the economy forward, that business and labor are on absolutely the same page. And you've been a key part of this. So let me put you on the spot a little bit, John. How about you join us on the Oregon Business Plan Steering Committee? Would you do that?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to, Pat. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
It's a very kind offer. I'm honored to do it.
Great. Beautiful. Well, I want to thank our panelists. Great discussion. Thank you so much. And we'll move the agenda on. Thank you. Great.
Thanks,
Well done.
Matt.
Thank you,
Appreciate
John.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well done. Hey, that's Nick. Thank you.